Someone once walked into a Fortune 500 interview, claimed they invented a product that was already sitting on the interviewer's desk, made by someone who was very much still alive, and somehow got the job. We found 49 of the most jaw-dropping, facepalm, borderline delusional lies people actually put on their resumes to land high-level careers. And some of these will make you question every executive you have ever trusted in your entire life. If you make it to number 31, your brain will genuinely short-circuit. Hit that new hype button right now. It costs you nothing. It means everything to this channel, and let's get into it. 1. A man once updated his resume, claiming he had personally invented Post-it notes. He walked into that interview chest out and confidence blazing, and the hiring team was impressed until someone quietly Googled it mid-meeting. The actual inventor was not only alive but still actively working at 3M. The room went so silent you could hear a sticky note fall. He later explained he meant he had invented a personal system for using them. Nobody asked any follow-up questions. He did not get the job. 2. A fresh-faced applicant listed NASA consultant on her resume like it was nothing. The hiring panel leaned forward. She leaned back. Turned out her entire NASA experience was a school field trip to Kennedy Space Center in 7th grade, where she touched a moon rock behind a glass case. She had stood near rockets. She had eaten a freeze-dried ice cream sandwich. In her mind, that was consulting. The panel disagreed loudly. Security escorted her out with the freeze-dried dignity she arrived with. 3. A guy walked into his interview radiating total confidence after listing fluency in Mandarin on his resume. The hiring manager smiled and switched to Mandarin immediately, then stayed in Mandarin for the entire interview. The guy smiled back. He nodded. He tilted his head thoughtfully at questions he understood 0% of. 40 minutes passed this way. Colleagues peeked through the glass watching a man perform the greatest silent nodding performance of his generation. He left without saying a single word in any language. 4. A woman submitted her application listing a PhD from Oxford so casually it seemed insulting not to believe her. The panel was thrilled. Someone even printed her name on a reserved parking spot. Then the background check came back. Oxford had no record of her enrollment, no record of her degree, no record of her name. A second team contacted England directly just to be thorough. England also had no idea. She had simply typed Oxford and assumed nobody checks these things. 5. An older gentleman listed managed a team of 200 employees on his resume with the energy of a retired general. The interview panel was visibly excited, then someone asked where. He paused. He straightened his tie. He explained it was a Chuck E. Cheese location in suburban Ohio. There were not 200 employees. There were 11 teenagers and one broken animatronic bear. He had been assistant manager for 4 months before the location closed. He considered the bear part of his team. 6. A man applied for an airline executive role and listed licensed pilot as a core qualification. The company was thrilled. On his first week, someone casually asked about his flight hours. He went very still. His entire piloting career had taken place inside Microsoft Flight Simulator on a laptop he bought in 2009. He knew the keyboard shortcuts. He had landed virtually in 17 countries. He had also virtually crashed in 4 of them. Real airlines do not accept virtual landings as logged hours. 7. A young woman added fluent in sign language to her resume purely to appear more impressive during a nonprofit hiring process. She got the job. Everything was fine for exactly 2 days. On day 3, her first deaf coworker arrived. He signed a friendly greeting. She stared. She waved slowly with both hands in a way that communicated absolutely nothing. She later told HR she had meant she was fluent in watching sign language on YouTube. And that is not the same thing. Everyone agreed. 8. A guy applied to lead a fitness company and listed marathon runner under his athletic credentials like it was a casual fact. The panel loved it. During the interview, someone asked about his training routine. He explained he had completed one 5K the previous spring at a local charity run. He had not exactly run the whole thing. The last mile he had walked while eating a donated banana. A 5K is 3 miles. A marathon is 26. He seemed unaware of this gap. 9. A man confidently listed law degree on his executive application and spoke about legal matters with remarkable passion throughout the interview. Someone on the panel was an actual attorney. She started asking questions, specific questions. He began sweating through his blazer in real time. His entire legal education consisted of watching every single episode of Suits. Twice. He knew the characters deeply. He understood the drama completely. He had strong opinions about Harvey Specter. None of that qualifies a person to practice or claim law. 10. A teenager who had once visited Washington on a school trip listed former White House intern on his resume, a full decade later. He had walked through the East Wing with a visitor badge and a packed lunch. He had shaken no hands. He had attended no briefings. He had purchased a White House snow globe from the gift shop. The hiring team called the White House directly to verify. The White House had never heard his name. The snow globe could not be reached for comment. 11. A woman listed spoke at TED on her resume like it was a regular Tuesday achievement. In the interview panel exchanged impressed glances. Someone almost started a standing ovation. Then the details emerged. It was a TEDx event at a middle school, organized by her nephew's class as a fundraiser. The audience was 11 parents seated on plastic chairs in a gymnasium that smelled like lunch. 3 of them were on their phones. 2 had left before she finished. She still listed it as a global speaking engagement. 12. A young guy wrote co-founded a startup valued at $10 million on his application like a seasoned Silicon Valley veteran. The investors on the panel were immediately curious. He explained the startup calmly. He and his college roommate had built a website together during finals week. It had received 200 visits total. Most of those were from their own devices refreshing the page. They had never incorporated. They had never launched a product. The website no longer existed. He valued the experience at $10 million anyway. 13. An older applicant listed expert in artificial intelligence and machine learning on his resume for a senior technology role. The technical team prepared advanced questions. He arrived confident. The first question landed. He paused thoughtfully and explained his experience came primarily from extended debates with ChatGPT about whether certain movies were accurately rated on the internet. He had strong opinions. ChatGPT had disagreed with him multiple times. He felt that counted as hands-on machine learning exposure. The technical team sat in complete silence for several seconds. 14. A woman applied for a senior consulting role and listed 20 years of experience in her field without hesitation. The panel was impressed until a quiet analyst in the corner opened his laptop. He typed. He frowned. He typed again. The field she had claimed 20 years in had only existed for 12 years total. It was a relatively new discipline. Nobody on Earth had 20 years in it. She explained she had been thinking about it for 8 additional years before it was invented. The analyst closed his laptop. 15. A broad-shouldered man in a crisp suit applied for a security director role and listed former Navy SEAL at the very top of his resume. The hiring team nearly applauded on the spot. Then the background check arrived. He had not served as a Navy SEAL. He had not served in the Navy at all. He had applied to the Navy many years ago and had been fully rejected during the initial screening process. He had driven home from that rejection and apparently decided that still counted as a military career. 16. A woman told the entertainment company she had appeared on national television and submitted the resume with total confidence. The media team loved it. Someone asked which program, she explained calmly. She had been standing on a sidewalk eating a hot dog when a local news crew filmed a live segment nearby. She was visible for approximately 2 seconds in the background, slightly out of focus, facing the wrong direction. She had screenshotted the moment and watched it many times. She considered that a television appearance, and nobody could fully argue otherwise. 17. And a young man listed raised $2 million in venture capital on his application for a startup leadership role. The investors leaned forward. He leaned forward too. Someone asked about the raise. He explained that his parents had lent him $2 million to purchase a house. He had personally considered the house a private venture. The capital had come from his family. The venture had been real estate. He was currently living in the house. There were no investors. There was no startup. There was only a mortgage and a very proud resume. 18. A woman applying for a senior food industry role listed trained under a Michelin star chef as her headline culinary credential. The panel was immediately dazzled. Someone asked which chef. She named him proudly. A quick search revealed that the chef in question had once appeared at a Williams-Sonoma store in a shopping mall to demonstrate knife technique during a Saturday afternoon event. She had attended. She had stood near the front. She had watched him dice an onion extremely well. She left having purchased a cutting board and a dream. 19. An uncle who wore confidence like a tailored coat applied for a turnaround specialist role and listed saved 3 companies on his resume. The board was ready to hire him before the interview ended. Then someone asked about the companies. All 3 had gone bankrupt after he left. He explained that he had personally identified the problems at each one before departing. He had seen the trouble coming. He had simply chosen to leave first. He described this as strategic foresight. 3 collapsed companies described it differently but could no longer speak. 20. A woman applying for a senior engineering position listed proficient in 6 programming languages on her resume with remarkable specificity. The technical panel prepared a practical assessment. She arrived composed. The first exercise appeared on screen. She looked at it carefully. She looked at the panel. She explained that by proficient, she had meant she was familiar with the names of 6 programming languages. She had heard them mentioned in various contexts. She could spell most of them correctly. Writing actual code in any of them had not been part of her plan. 21. A guy applied to run a registered charity and listed founded a nonprofit on his application like a seasoned philanthropist. The board was moved. Someone nearly teared up, and then the details came out slowly like a slow puncture. He had created a GoFundMe page for his dog, who had needed emergency surgery 2 years prior. The dog had recovered fully. He had raised enough to cover the vet bill. He had kept $200 remaining after everything was settled. He considered the leftover funds an administrative fee. The charity board did not consider this nonprofit founding experience. 22. An older gentleman listed expert negotiator on his resume for a high-stakes corporate role and spoke about conflict resolution with tremendous authority throughout the interview. The panel was engaged. Someone asked for a specific example of his negotiation experience. He straightened his jacket. He thought carefully. He then explained that in 2017 he had successfully convinced a parking enforcement officer not to issue him a ticket by arguing that the meter had been unclear. The officer had eventually walked away. He had framed this moment ever since as his greatest professional achievement in negotiation. 23. A man applied for a chief executive role and listed scaled a business from 0 to $100 million on his resume. The investment panel nearly stood up and cheered. Someone asked for specifics. He explained that the company had indeed reached $100 million in revenue during the period he worked there. What he had not mentioned was that he had worked in the mailroom. For 4 months, he had sorted packages. He had occasionally signed for deliveries. The company had scaled entirely without his involvement. He felt proximity deserved some credit. 24. A young professional listed visionary as her official job title from her previous employer and submitted it without a single hesitation. The hiring panel stared at the word for a long moment. Someone asked who had given her that title. She explained she had been self-employed at the time. A follow-up question arrived about what the business was. She paused only briefly before answering that she had been reselling air fryers on Facebook Marketplace. She had given herself the title visionary because she had sensed the air fryer trend arriving before most people in her neighborhood noticed it. 25. A man listed a master's degree in finance on his application for a senior banking role and discussed market theory with surprising enthusiasm throughout the first interview round. The second round included a verification call. The university had no record of him completing the degree. He later admitted he had enrolled in an online finance course during a period of personal motivation. He had completed 60% of it before the free trial expired. He had never paid for full access. He had never finished. He had simply rounded up aggressively and hoped for the best. 26. A woman told the executive search team she had overseen 3,000 employees at her previous company and delivered the claim with total composure. The panel was stunned in the best way. During the reference check, things began unraveling quietly. She had been an HR coordinator at a company that employed 3,000 people. She had not managed them. She had not supervised them. She had processed some of their paperwork on occasion. She had once emailed the entire staff by accident. She counted that broadcast as company-wide leadership and felt the math was reasonable. 27. A guy applied for a media executive role and listed published author as a headline credential on his resume. The literary-minded panel was charmed immediately. Someone asked about the book. He described it warmly. It was a self-published PDF. 14 pages long. The topic was personal productivity. It had 3 reviews on the platform where he had uploaded it. All 3 reviews had been written from his own email addresses using slightly different names. He had given himself 4 stars on 2 accounts and 5 stars on the third because he felt the ending was particularly strong. 28. For a man told the leadership panel he had climbed Mount Everest when asked to describe a moment that demonstrated his ability to perform under extreme pressure. The room went quiet with admiration. Someone asked about base camp. He nodded knowingly. Further questions arrived about altitude and conditions. He eventually admitted he'd completed a hiking trail in New Jersey. The trail had the word summit in its name. It had taken him 2 hours. There had been a snack bar at the top. He had bought a bottle of water and considered the journey genuinely life-changing. 29. A woman applied for a culinary brand executive role and listed celebrity chef as her professional background without any visible guilt. The food industry panel was excited. They asked which restaurants she had helmed. She explained she had not exactly run a restaurant. She had cooked at a charity barbecue the previous summer. The guest of honor at that event had been a local television weatherman who covered the tri-state area. She had grilled chicken for approximately 40 people. The weatherman had taken seconds. She had interpreted his return to the buffet line as a professional endorsement of her culinary career. 30. A woman listed black belt in karate under executive skills to demonstrate personal discipline and mental toughness during her leadership application. The panel found it impressive and edgy. Someone asked which dojo she had trained at. She named a strip mall location confidently. A phone call was made. The instructor remembered her. She had attended exactly 4 introductory classes in 2011. She had learned to bow correctly upon entering. She had learned 1 basic stance. She had then simply stopped coming without calling. The instructor had kept her on the attendance sheet for 6 months, hoping she would return. 31. A guy told the multinational board he had led cross-functional teams across 5 continents and presented it like a man who had personally unified the globe through sheer management ability. The panel was dazzled. Someone asked how he had coordinated across so many regions. He explained carefully. His team had 5 members. Each member had originally been born on a different continent. He had therefore concluded that his team collectively represented 5 continents. He had led them via group chat. The chat was still active. He offered to show the panel the message history as supporting evidence. Well, the 32. An older man listed expert witness experience in federal court on his resume for a high-profile legal consulting role. The law firm was immediately interested. Someone asked which cases he had testified in. He leaned back. He explained that he had not exactly testified. He had served as a juror on one federal case several years prior. During deliberations, he had raised his hand and asked what the panel later agreed was a very good question. The judge had nodded in his direction. He had interpreted that nod as formal recognition of his legal expertise and built his entire resume around it. 33. A man applied for a senior finance role and listed former Goldman Sachs analyst as his most prominent credential. The hiring partners were visibly impressed before he finished sitting down. Someone requested details about his tenure there. He explained the situation honestly and without apparent shame. He had interviewed at Goldman Sachs once. He had not received an offer. He had not received a callback. He had received a politely worded rejection email that he still had saved in a folder. He felt the interview process alone had been professionally formative enough to list the firm as a past employer. 34. A young woman applied for a blockchain technology role and listed invented technologies as a resume section before placing blockchain confidently inside it. The tech panel stared at that section, heading for a long time. Someone asked her to elaborate. She explained that she had purchased $40 worth of Dogecoin during a period of significant online enthusiasm. She had held it for 1 week. She had then lost most of it. She described the entire experience as immersive, hands-on blockchain exposure. She had watched the numbers go down in real time. She felt that counted as having worked deeply inside the technology. 35. A man in a sharp suit told the Fortune 500 board he had personally restructured an entire major corporation and listed it as his defining career achievement. The executives exchanged impressed looks across a very long table. Someone asked for his exact role during the restructuring. He thought for a moment. He had worked at the company for 2 months as a temporary placement. His primary contribution during that period had been reorganizing the supply closet on the 14th floor. He had grouped items by category. He had labeled the shelves. He considered this a structural overhaul and stood by that description completely. 36. A woman listed internationally recognized speaker on her resume for a communications director role and discussed global influence with remarkable confidence. Throughout the interview, the panel was engaged. Someone asked about her international speaking history. She explained that she had delivered a Zoom presentation to a small group earlier that year. The topic had been quarterly budget updates. Most attendees had their cameras off. However, one participant had dialed in from Canada. She had therefore concluded that her presentation had crossed an international border and qualified her as a globally recognized voice in her field. The panel from Canada did not agree. 37. A man submitted his application with Time magazine featured printed boldly near the top like a lighthouse beacon of credibility. The media company was immediately intrigued. Someone asked which story he had been featured in. He pulled up the article on his phone with practiced confidence. The article was a profile of a well-known business executive photographed at an industry event. In the background of one image standing slightly behind a potted plant was a figure that he confirmed was himself. He was partially obscured. He was not named. He was not mentioned. He had been cropped in a later edition. 38. A woman told the nonprofit board she had personally managed a $50 million budget at her previous organization and delivered the figure without blinking. The finance committee was stunned and thrilled simultaneously. During due diligence, the number began falling apart quietly. She had been treasurer of her homeowners association. The HOA budget was not $50 million. It had never been $50 million. She had arrived at that figure by adding together the estimated property values of every home in the entire neighborhood and deciding that she technically oversaw that collective sum. The auditor took 3 days to recover. 39. A guy walked into the sports marketing interview and listed former professional athlete on his resume with the posture of someone who had played in championship finals. The panel leaned forward. Someone asked which sport and which league. He explained without hesitation. He had competed in a semi-professional cornhole tournament. It had been held in a regional event in Ohio one summer. There had been 12 teams. His team had finished 7th. He had brought his own cornhole boards, which he felt demonstrated serious commitment to the sport. The panel had several follow-up questions that he answered with complete sincerity. 40. A man applied for a chief people officer role and listed doctorate in psychology on his application with what appeared to be absolute academic confidence. The HR board prepared deep behavioral questions. He answered each one by referencing specific concepts he had encountered through reading. Someone asked which institution had granted his doctorate. He explained thoughtfully that his education had been largely self-directed. He had read the complete published works of Malcolm Gladwell, every book, every essay, several interviews. He felt the accumulated insight was spiritually and intellectually equivalent to a doctoral qualification. The board felt differently, but admired his commitment to Gladwell. 41. A young woman listed podcast host with millions of listeners on her media resume and walked into that interview like someone whose name belonged on a billboard. The content team was excited. Someone asked for the show name to look it up. She provided it confidently. The podcast had 14 episodes. Total downloads across all episodes combined sat at 312. A significant portion of those downloads came from her immediate family members who had listened out of obligation. One additional source of downloads had been traced to an automated bot operating out of Romania. She counted all of them, 42. A man applied for a certified financial planner position at a wealth management firm and listed his certification prominently at the top of his resume like a decorated veteran. The compliance team requested his credentials immediately. He explained the certification process he had completed. At the end of a free article on a personal finance website, he had scrolled to the bottom and completed a short quiz. The quiz had 5 questions. He had passed. A small congratulations message had appeared on screen. He had screenshotted it. He had titled the screenshot certification and saved it in a folder labeled Qualifications. 43. A woman submitted her journalism application listing New York Times contributor as her most prestigious credential in large, confident font. The editorial team was genuinely excited to meet her. Someone asked which pieces she had contributed. She explained her history with the publication carefully. In 2016, she had written a letter to the editor expressing her opinion on a local infrastructure issue. It had not been published. Undeterred, she had submitted the same letter again in 2019 with minor adjustments to the opening sentence. That version had also not been published. She counted both submissions as an ongoing contributor relationship with the paper. 44. A man applied to become a hospital administrator and listed licensed surgeon as medical background on his application with the calm energy of someone who had performed thousands of procedures. The hospital board was immediately alarmed and immediately curious in equal measure. A verification request was sent to every medical licensing board in the country, yet nothing came back. He had no surgical training, he had no medical degree. He had, however, watched every single season of Grey's Anatomy, including the later ones that most fans had quietly abandoned. He felt 17 seasons of clinical observation was a reasonable substitute for medical school. 45. A guy applied for an innovation leadership role and listed invented a patented product under his credentials like a man who had genuinely changed the world. The product development team was intrigued. Someone asked about the patent. He produced documentation proudly. The patent was real. It had been granted 11 years prior. The invention was a specific decorative rock shape designed for garden landscaping. It had a slightly flattened bottom and a particular curve along the left side. And it had generated exactly $0 in licensing revenue across its entire existence. He described it as ahead of its time, and the market is simply not ready. 46. A woman applied for a streaming platform executive role and listed award-winning filmmaker as her creative background with genuine pride. The content leadership team was intrigued. Someone asked about her body of work. She described her filmmaking career warmly. She had produced one video. It had been submitted to her company's internal holiday party competition the previous December. The video had featured her colleagues lip-syncing to a festive song in the break room. It had won the category of Most Creative Video. The prize had been a $25 gift card to Applebee's. She had framed the announcement email and hung it above her desk. 47. A man submitted his application for a Chief Technology Officer position and listed fluency in Python, Java, and C++ as his core technical skills in bold font at the very top of his resume. The engineering panel prepared a technical assessment with quiet confidence. The screen loaded. The first question appeared asking him to write a basic function. He looked at the screen, he looked at the panel. He reached for his phone. He opened a search engine. He typed the words, "What is a variable?" into the search bar at a speed that everyone in the room could clearly observe. The interview ended shortly after. 48. An aunt who carried herself with the energy of someone who had classified information applied for a national security consulting role and listed former government intelligence analyst on her resume. The firm was intrigued. Background verification began immediately. Nothing matched. No agency had any record of her. She later explained her qualifications during a follow-up call without any embarrassment. She had completed an online geography quiz on a popular trivia website. She had scored in the 98th percentile. She felt the overlap between knowing world capitals and analyzing national intelligence was significant enough to list it as formal government experience. The firm disagreed immediately. 49. A man closed out his executive biography with serial entrepreneur with 4 successful exits and delivered it with the energy of someone who had conquered entire industries. The venture capital panel was ready to write a check before the meeting started. Someone asked about the exits. He explained each one patiently and without shame. Every exit had been a different Etsy shop he had personally closed down. One had sold handmade candles, one had sold vintage buttons, one had sold motivational bookmarks. He had shut each one down voluntarily. During the interview, he described the market as simply not ready for any of them. The panel put the checkbook away, and that is 49 real human beings who looked a hiring panel dead in the eyes and said, "Yes, I absolutely did that." No shame, no hesitation, just pure unhinged confidence, held together by nothing but a Wi-Fi connection and a dream. If any of these people are currently your boss, please like this video immediately because you deserve support. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications because BrainFumble serves this kind of beautiful chaos on a regular basis. Share this with someone who has definitely exaggerated their resume at least once. Now tell us in the comments, what is the most creative lie you have ever put on a resume? We will not judge. Actually, we absolutely will.